Good afternoon, class. This is Dr. Araypur. We are looking at college algebra practice test number 1 for module 1, covering chapter 2, equations and inequalities. All right, we want to find the distance between the 2 points. And we want to find the midpoint. So a quick recap of what we have learned as far as the distance formula is concerned, following the Pythagorean theorem. D is x sub 2 minus x sub 1 quantity squared. That means this distance. Plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1, meaning this distance squared. And you take a root of that. This is, in essence, Pythagorean theorem. So for this question, 4 minus negative 5, that means 4 plus 5, and 2 minus minus 6, that means 2 plus 6. So that gives us 9 squared, you get 81. That gives us 8 squared, you get 64. Add them up, and this is the precise answer. And a rough estimate with a bunch of decimals. However many decimals they ask you to come up with. As far as the midpoint is concerned, basically add up the coordinates and divide by 2. Same thing for x, same thing for y. So in this case, we are adding up negative 5 and 4 divided by 2. We are adding up negative 6 and 2 divided by 2. Those are the answers, and we repeat parts A and B. So distance and midpoint formulas. A man drove 10 miles directly east from his home, made a left turn at an intersection, and then traveled 5 miles north to his place of work. A, if a road was made directly from his home to his place of work, what would its distance be? Of course, to the nearest tenth of a mile. If the road was made in the previous exercise, how much shorter would the man's one-way trip be every day? So in other words, we got to go this way, 10 miles. This is the home. And we're going to go up north 5 miles this way. So according to Pythagorean theorem, if this is A, this is B, then A squared plus B squared equals C squared. That's the concept everybody remembers. So you can think of this as A, this one as B. Those are the legs, if you will. And we calculate that. That's a simple calculation, 10 squared plus 5 squared. And that would be the distance from here to here. C would be this distance. This is A. This is B. So going from this point to this point. So let's say A, B. So that's the distance. Well, in order to find the difference, we can go this way and that way. That means we're going to add A and B. That means we're going to go 10 plus 5 or 15 miles. If we subtract this, that means the difference of 3.8 miles roughly. That's what we will save if we go straight in this direction. We want to solve this equation. It is a rational equation. 2 things we need to do. Number 1, we want to exclude every denominator that becomes 0. So you said this one equal to 0, x becomes negative 1. You said this one equal to 0, x becomes 3. You're excluding that. Also, to do so, you have to factor this out, which is the product of these 2, in fact, and said that one also equal to 0 and exclude it. So we are excluding negative 1 and 3. That's very important. At the end, you want to check your work. Now we are factoring the last denominator, and we are multiplying both sides of this equation by this LCD, the least common denominator. So when we multiply the first fraction by it, we get 5 times x minus 3. When we multiply by the second one, we get plus 1 times x plus 1. And the right side is just the numerator because this cancels out this one. This becomes a very simple case of a linear equation. We are going to distribute 5x minus 15 plus x plus 1, 5x and x, 6x minus 15 and plus 1 minus 14 moves to the other side, becomes positive 14. Therefore, 6x is 8. X is 8 over 6, which simplifies to 4/3. You check, all is fine because those two numbers are not acceptable. That's how you check with that. We want to look at lines, slopes, and their interpretation. First, rise overrun by definition gives us the slope y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, known as the average rate of change of y with respect to x. If you look at this drawing, the red one has a positive slope, orange one has a negative slope, horizontal line has a 0 slope, vertical line has an undefined slope. I'm refreshing your memory about that. And so horizontal lines, y equals a constant, slope is 0, y-intercept at 0b. Vertical lines, x equals a constant, slope is undefined, x-intercept at a0. Different ways of writing a line, standard form ax plus by equals c. Slope intercept form y equals mx plus b. Point slope y minus y1 equals m times x minus x of 1. Two lines are considered parallel if they have equal slopes, different y-intercepts. Two lines are considered perpendicular, making a 90-degree angle at the point of intersection if their slopes are negative reciprocal of each other or their product is -1. This whole page is just to refresh your memory about linear functions and lines and their graphs. So hopefully everybody is in good shape with that. We want to graph these two easy function lines, linear equations, x equals -2. So we can see that we have a vertical line with the x-intercept at -2, 0. We draw the line and we're done. On the other hand, for y equals 3, we have a y-intercept of 0, 3, and the line is a horizontal line. Find the equation of a line that contains these two pairs. You can go through the process of finding it, but an easy way is notice that they both have the same x coordinates, therefore x equals 4. You don't have to do much. Identical x coordinates, it's a vertical line. Whereas in this case, they have identical y coordinates, it's a horizontal line. Very straightforward. We want to find the equation of a line in slope-intercept form that contains these two pairs. Now we have to go through the process. First and foremost, we need to use this formula to find the slope. So y sub 2 minus y sub 1. So -6 minus 10 over 5 minus -3, x sub 2 minus x sub 1, which results in -16 at top, +8 at the bottom, giving us -2. So that's the slope. Now we're going to use this point slope formula, and we're going to use either this one or that one. It makes no difference. So if we use this one, y minus 10 equals m, which is -2, x minus x sub 1, that means x plus 3, because it's x minus -3. We are going to distribute the -2. That gives us -2x minus 6. We are going to move the -10, make it +10, and we end up with y equals -2x plus 1. Now, granted, we could graph just using those pairs, but it's really a good idea to come up with the intercepts. Obviously, we have one of them. The y-intercept is 4. Make sure you write the pairs unless otherwise is mentioned. So the y-intercept is 0, 4. And the x-intercept, you set this one equal to 0, x becomes 2. Now plot the two pairs, 0, 4, 2, 0, connect them, and you have the line. Here, -3, 10 is up there. Of course, we can always use those, but it's a better practice to go with the intercepts because it gives us a better graph, a more precise graph. We are interested in finding the equation of a line that is perpendicular to this and contains this pair. So first thing first, let's find the slope of a given. That means divide by 3. And therefore, this line in slope-intercept form gives us the slope m sub 1, let's call it, equal to 1/3. The one perpendicular to this, reciprocal and negative. So reciprocal is 3 times negative. So it's the slope m sub 2 is -3. This is the line we are interested in, the line with this slope and this pair. So we're going to use this formula. And we're going to plug in this pair with this slope. So y minus 1 equals m, which is -3x minus -2, which makes it +2. Obviously, we are going to distribute, meaning this is going to give us -3x minus 6. We're going to move this and make it +1 on the other side. And here's your final answer. This is the equation of a line that is perpendicular to this line, and it contains this pair. Now we want to graph this setting. We can use any pairs, but the best course of action would be to go with the intercept. So right here for this one of the intercepts is given here. So for this one of the intercepts is 0, -4/3. But what about the other one? If you set y equal to 0, clearly x becomes 4. So those are easy pairs. One of them is known and one of them we can easily find. Plot those two pairs. So we are looking at 0, -4/3. That means -1 and 1/3. 4, 0, connect the two, and that is the given line. The new one, we want to come up with the pairs also. One of them is given 0, -5 is the y-intercept. You set this one equal to 0, and that's an easy solve. Move this one, 3x equals -5, so it becomes -5/3. Plot those two pairs. -5/3 means -1 and 2/3 roughly here. 0, -5, connect the two. And it's a good practice to put this pair so you know it's on the same line. Okay. As to word problem, a retired woman has $50,000 to invest, but needs to make $6,000 a year from the interest to meet certain living expenses. One bond investment pays 15% annual interest. The rest of it she wants to put in a CD that pays 7%. All right, so I want to solve this. If we let X be the amount the woman invests in the 15% bond, how much will she be able to invest in the CD? And we want to set up and solve. The second part says, set up and solve the equation for how much the woman should invest in each option to sustain a $6,000 annual return. It's important to set this up properly. In essence, this is also a class of problem really known as a mixture problem. So let's see what we have. First, we are going to look at the 15% and then the 7%, and how much we're going to put in the 15% is X amount. Let X represent that. Therefore, how much will be in the CD, which is paying 7%, then it will be 50,000 minus X. And that's really not only the answer to part A, it is also the concept that I was mentioning, known as a mixture problem, because the total amount, the total volume, the total weights, depending upon what type of a problem you're dealing with, it's a constant. They should add up to 50. By the way, one may ask why not put all of them at 15%. There may be different restrictions or tax restrictions. The simple interest is PRT, the amount of principal times the rate times the time. The time in an annual case or in 1 year is just 1. So it's the product of these two and these two. And again, remember, T is 1. And we want to get $6,000. According to part B, we need 6,000. So this is 0.15 times X. This is 0.07 times 50,000 minus X. And the equation for this would be add these two up to get $6,000. So this is the start of part B. We can multiply both sides by 100 if you want to get rid of the decimals. But just the way it is, you can leave that and you can multiply these two. How do you multiply? Ignore the zeros, ignore the decimals. 7 times 5 is 35. You have 2 decimals, 4 zeros, so you need 2 zeros. So it's very straightforward. 7 times 5 is 35. This has 2 decimals. Okay. And this one has 4 zeros. 1 0 cancels out 1 decimal. We have extra zeros. By how many? 2. And that's what we put in. This is a simple calculation using you don't have to use the calculator. 0.07 subtracted from 0.15, you get 0.08. 3,500 subtracted from 6,000. We're going to move it to the other side. In other words, these two, we put them together. And this one we subtract from the other side. And 0.08x is 2,500. All you have to do, divide both sides by 0.08, and there you have it. Divide both sides by 0.08. So X is this amount, so we invest $31,250 at a 50% return, and the rest of it, 50K minus this number, which is 18,750 at the one that pays 7%. By the way, to check, you just multiply these two numbers and these two numbers, they must add up to 6,000. Flora starts riding her bike at 20 miles per hour. After a while, she slows down to 12 miles per hour and maintains that speed for the rest of the trip. The whole trip of 70 miles takes her 4.5 hours. For what distance did she travel at 20 miles per hour? This is a class of problem known as a motion problem. D equals RT, this is the distance, R is the rate, T is the time. And so here's the setup you need. So we're going to start after a while total rate time distance. So starts with what? The rate, 20 miles per hour. And then goes down to 12 miles per hour. The total trip is 70 miles. So under the distance, total is 70 miles, and the total time is 4.5. This is 70 miles. This is 4.5 hours. All right. So we want to find for what distance did she travel at 20 miles per hour. So let's say this one is X, Y, Z, T, any variable of your choice. So if you choose it to be T, then this must be 4.5 minus T. So 20 times T goes here, 12 times 4.5 minus T goes the distance for here. So this is 20T. This is 12 times 4.5 minus T. They must add up to give us total distance of 70 miles. And all you have to do, just distribute, do the math, and we are done. So 20T, this is minus 12T. Let me just write that. So this one, when you multiply, you get 54 minus 12T. This one and this one, they give us 8T. We are going to subtract 54 and we get 8T equals 16. Divide by 8, T becomes 2. So if T is 2, that means this one must be 2.5. We wanted to know the distance. We want to know this one. So 20 times T. So you want to make sure you go back and answer the question. So this one is 40 miles. In other words, this is the 2 hours. This is 40 miles. That's what the question asks. You can answer the rest of it. All right. In this case, first we want to solve for W. So let's do that, and then we move on to the next part of it. To solve for W, let's move the 2L first, and then let's divide both sides by 2. And that's the answer. Before we move on, I want to make a point that you cannot cancel out this 2 because 2 is not a factor for the numerator. However, I want to make sure everybody understands, if somebody wrote instead of this P over 2 minus 2L over L, which makes it L, that's just as good. Now we want to find the width of a rectangle whose length is 15. So you're going to replace this L with 15, and whose perimeter is 58. Replace the P with 58. So this is 30. (58) minus 30 is 28. Divided by 2 gives us the width of 14, whatever the units. All right, we want to perform the indicated operations. We are dealing with complex numbers in the form of a plus bi. So to remind you, square root of -1 is I, square root of -n is I squared of n. And the product of these two is a squared plus b squared. The reason why is because a plus b times a minus b, I hope you remember it was a squared minus b squared. So this becomes a squared minus b squared I squared, and since I squared is -1, that's what we get. So to add them up, just imagine I is X and do the math. So to multiply. So -1 multiplied by -2, you get 2. In other words, distribute class. Do the foiling. -1 times 3i is -3i. Negative plus 2i times -2 is -4i. Plus 2i times 3i is 6i squared. Now these two add up to -7i. I squared, we change it to -1 because I'm refreshing your memory again. I equals the square root of -1. I squared is -1. Take a look at this two. If I multiply this one by I, becomes I cubed. If I multiply this one by I, becomes -I. So I cubed is -I. And if I multiply it by I again, I get 1, or you can square this one and you get 1, which means when the exponent is 4 or powers of 4, the answer is 1. Make a note of that. We're going to use that in a moment. So this I squared changes to -1 times plus 6 becomes -6. We add these two. And we add these two. We end up with -4 minus 7i. This is in the form of a plus bi, a complex number. If I want to do this one, I'm going to, if they say simplify or divide or rationalize or put it in a standard form, they all mean the same thing. I'm going to multiply by the complex conjugate of the denominator, which is 2 plus I. Also, I'm going to divide by it because this fraction is equal to 1. So how do you do the top? How do you do the bottom? The top is done simply by foiling, just like this one. The bottom also by foiling, but we know the easy way out. So the bottom is really 2 squared plus 1 squared. So using this. The top, 3 times 2 is 6, plus 3i, plus 8i, plus 4i squared. So that's what we have. And we are going to change this to -4, 6, and -4. They add up to +2. These two add up to 11i. 2 squared is 4 plus 1, 5. Now, if you left it as this is fine. The reason I like to change it into two fractions because clearly I want you to know what's your a, 2 over 5, what's your b, 11 over 5, because in this format, we may make a mistake with the a and b. So this one for sure, we can see what's a and what's b. In order to take care of the business here, you got to get rid of the negative sign. So you must change this to 3i plus 3 times, you must change this to 4i. Their product is 12i. We're going to add this to 3i and we end up with 15i. I to the power of -6. Anytime you have powers of either, remember, I to the power of 4 is 1. So somehow you want to get that involved. So because it has a negative exponent, you can take it down and make it positive exponent. And now all you have to do, divide number 6 by 4, divide 6 by 4, and keep the remainder. I want to make sure everybody understands what I'm saying here. So 6 divided by 4, I'm interested in the remainder, which is 2. So 1 over I squared. And we know I squared is -1. And that's the final answer. To make sure we understand how this thing works, let's look at a couple of examples quickly here. How do we do that? Divide this number by what? 4. Why 4? because I to the power of 4 is 1. We don't want the quotient, we just want the remainder. Okay, and the remainder happened to be 1. So the answer is I to the power of 1, which is I. Again, to make sure we are comfortable with that, take a look at this example. 43 divided by 4. We just want the remainder, and I hope you know it's 3. So the answer is I cubed, and we should know I cubed is negative. That's how you take care of the business. We want to look at a quadratic equation starting with the square root property. If x squared is a, x is plus minus square root of a. That's called the square root property or principle. If we want to solve this, we get x equals plus minus square root of 49, which is plus minus 7. If we want to do this by completing the square, we should remember a perfect square trinomial is a trinomial that is in this form, can be expressed as the square of a binomial. So x squared minus 10x plus 25, for example, is x minus 5 squared. And you need to note that how we arrive at this number, if you divide this by 2 and raise it to the second power, you get to this one. So the constant term is the square of 1/2 the coefficient of the x term, or b over 2a to the second power. If this is not 1, we use a. So what is the process? We move the constant, we add b over 2 quantity squared, we make it look like that, and solve the square root principle. I'll go over that with a couple of examples. For the quadratic formula, we already remember that, I hope, because we've seen it many, many times. If we are given ax squared plus bx plus c equal to 0, x is minus b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. What's under the radical is called the discriminant. This is a very important tool. If it's positive, that means we have two distinct real solutions. If it's 0, we have 1. And if it's negative, we have none, no real solutions, or 2 complex solutions. So solving this by completing the square, first and foremost, we are going to move the 7. Notice b is what number? 6 divided by 2 and square it. You get 3 squared, which is 9. We are going to add 9 to both sides. And what happens to the left, you always have x plus b over 2. When I say plus b over 2, whatever the sign is, since the sign of this is positive, so plus 3. And the right side, they add up to 2. Now you use the square root property. X plus 3 becomes plus minus square root of 2. And you move the number 3 and you're done. This is your final answer. What about this guy? We want to move the -4. We want to get rid of the 12. So two things, get rid of the constant, get rid of the a. So this moves, becomes +4 on the other side. Let's divide both sides by a, whatever it might be. So this becomes just z squared minus 7/2 z equals 4/2 or 2. Equals 4/2 or 2. Now that we have that, what is b? Is this number. We are going to divide it by 2. So b is -7/2 divided by 2 becomes -7/4. Square it and you get 49 over 16. That is extremely important for everybody to see, that we have to divide a fraction by 2, which means we multiply the denominator by 2. So having said that, we need to add 49 over 16 to both sides of this equation. And we do that. Now, what is the left side? As I mentioned, it's always the variable, whatever it might be. In this case, the variable is z, and b over 2, including the sign. So plus b over 2. B over 2 is negative 7 halves. So that means minus 7 halves. And the right side is 2 times 16. 32 plus 49 is 81 over 16. So I'm assuming we can add these two. And in order for you to know exactly what you need, just put a b over 2 in here. Taking a root will result in z minus 7/4 equals plus minus. Square root of this is 9 over 4 plus. So if we subtract this, 7 minus 9, 2 over 4 is 1/2. If we add them up, 7 plus 9, 16 over 4 is positive 4. So I'm assuming we can add them up easily. It's elementary. Let's look at some quadratic formulas. In this case, we are given 2x squared plus 4x equals 5. In order to use the quadratic formula, step 1, bring everything to the same side. And now notice a is 2, b is 4, c is negative 5. Just plug in. So minus b, so minus 4, plus minus the square root of b squared, that means 4 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 5. This is 16. And this is 40, giving us 56. And that is the product of number 4 and 14. So 4 comes out as 2. Now, it is important to understand that you have to factor the 2 out. I'm going to do that here, but you should be able to go to the next step even if you skip that. So this cancels out this one and gives us 2 in the denominator. So it is important that you be careful with that. Part B, basically, we're going to repeat the same thing, everybody. A is 7, B is 4, C is 3. Plug it into the formula. And do the math. This gives us negative 68. And again, it's a product of negative 1, 4, 17. By the way, this is -16 minus 84. So 4 comes out as 2. The negative one, we change it to I, and we end up with the following. By the way, I want to explain the I. Many times in text, they put them in between because they don't want anybody to be under the impression that the I is under the radical. So as long as you have that correct, more power to you. Notice there is a common factor of 2 between the top and the bottom. You take out the common factor of 2. I can't emphasize this enough. Everything is divisible by 2. This changes to negative 2. This 2 goes away, and this 14 changes to 7. This is the final answer, and you must do that. For this one to work, doesn't look like a quadratic. To make it so, you multiply both sides by x squared. Needless to say, x can't be 0. When you do that, you get 2x squared plus 4x minus 1. And a is 2, b is 4, c is negative 1. And again, you can plug in and do the math. It's a very straightforward class. So this is 16. This is plus 8. 24. Product of 4 and 6. 4 comes out as 2. And now again, notice there's a common factor of 2. This becomes -2. This 2 goes away. This 4 changes to 2. You must always put it in lowest step. If you left it as that, it is absolutely perfect class. However, in some instances, there are people who want to write it this way. Please understand, when you want to write it this way, this 2 doesn't cancel out this 2. That's not how it works. -2/2 becomes -1, and this remains as plus minus square root of 6/2. So we don't want to mix them up. We want to solve this absolute value equality, and whenever we want to solve an absolute value equality or inequality, the very first step is the same: isolate the absolute value. In this case, it is done for us, so we don't have to do anything. Then we look at the right side. If c is less than 0, let's say it was -5, there would be no solutions. So let's say it's -5, no solutions, you're done. But when it's positive, then you can say 4x minus 7 equals 5, 4x 7 equals -5. You have these two equations, and you're going to solve and check. So we're going to have plus minus 5. We will move the -7 and make it +7 on the other side. We divide by 4. 7 minus 5, that means that 2 divided by 4 is 1/2. 7 plus 5, that means 12/4 is 3. So those are the answers, and you must check, really, you must check. So let me quickly show you, you really have to check. If I were to check, let's say this one, I'm going to check this one. I'm going to go to the original equation, and I'm going to say 4 times 1/2 minus 7 in an absolute value. And I'm going to put a question mark because I'm checking, is it equal to 5? Notice 4 times 1/2 becomes 2, and 2 minus 7 becomes, so let me write that. 2 minus 7 becomes -5, and absolute value of -5 is 5, and that works. You can check the other one. As I mentioned, the very first step, by the way, equality or inequality makes no difference. Isolate. This one has a problem. We have a 1. We must remove it by moving it to the other side. So we subtracted 1. Now we are back in business. 2x minus 5 equals plus minus 2. Move the -5, becomes +5 on the other side, divide by 2. Now 5 minus 2 is 3 halves. 5 plus 2 is 7 halves. So you come up with those two answers. You have to check. You have to check both answers to be on the safe side, everybody. All right, we want to solve the inequality. Anytime we are dealing with an absolute value equality or inequality, the first step doesn't change. It is the isolation. It is already isolated. If this number, take a look, is larger than 0, then we sandwich it between negative and positive. Because it's 7, it is sandwiched between -7 and positive. If this number is negative, an absolute value less than a negative number can't happen, because absolute value in the worst case scenario is equal to 0. Therefore, if it's negative, no solutions. No solutions. Since it's positive, we make it like so. We are going to move the 3. And we're going to divide all sides by 2. And this is the final solution. We want to write the interval notation. This is the interval notation. And we want to graph this on a number line. So you draw a number line. We go from -5 to 2. -5 and 2 are not included because of the parentheses. And you can use either parentheses to represent that, or you can put a hole. Either way is fine. Don't mix them up. So if I put a hole here and here, that's just as good. In this case, let's go back to what we learned from the previous page. Step one, isolate the absolute value. It's not. Let's get rid of number 3. So let's subtract number 3 and this becomes 10. Let's get rid of number 2. That becomes absolute value of 3x minus 1 larger than or equal to 5. Now it's completely isolated. And take a look at this sign. When we have this sign larger or larger than or equal, if this is positive, then we say this is less than this number negative or larger than this number positive. In other words, look at what happens to this one. So you drop the absolute value. This is less than -5, and because it has the equality, we write the equality also, so less than or equal. Or, and this is an or statement. This was an and statement, this is an or statement. Drop the absolute value larger than or equal to 5, you are going to solve that. So we are going to move the -1. We're going to add 1 to both sides. So this becomes 3x less than or equal to -4, and this becomes larger than or equal to 6. We divide both sides by number 3, and this is the final solution. We are going to answer in different manners. So this is the final inequality solution. X is less than or equal to -4/3, or x is larger than or equal to 2. So less than or equal to -4/3, that means from -infinity to that number, union 2 to infinity. And because the endpoints, both endpoints are included, we use the brackets. Please understand, -infinity, +infinity, they are concepts, they don't get brackets. But those two numbers, the reason they get brackets because of the equality. And if we were to show that on a number line, it's very simple. You locate -4/3, which means -1 and 1/3. Either you put a bracket or a solid dot, and it goes all the way to -infinity. You also locate 2, and you shade it all the way to +infinity. So again, either brackets or a solid point, either way is fine, as long as you're consistent and don't mix them up. And for a case like this, if I move the 10, that means subtract the 10, because this is negative and this is less than, I hope you remember, there is no solutions. There is no solutions. The only thing I want to add is the following. If we happen to have a value which is negative for this one, for example, if you have, let's write it here, if you have, I don't know, 2x minus 1 is larger than -7. Whenever this is negative, it will always work, because any absolute value in the worst case scenario is 0. So this gives you all real numbers. And I want you to compare this to this, which is completely different, because this is less than a negative number. It can never happen. There is no solution. This can never happen. But if it's larger than, it can happen all the time. So distinguish between the two. We want to solve and check. It's a square root. So number 1, move the 7. So again, you want to isolate your root, and you want to raise it to an appropriate power, because it's a square root. You want to raise it to the second power. When we do that, this comes out. This becomes x squared minus 14x plus 49. I'm assuming everybody remembers a minus b quantity squared. And so you move the 2x becomes minus 2x. So a couple of things. Again, a minus b quantity squared is a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. If we had a plus sign here, we would have a plus sign. This one with this one gives us negative 16x. This one with this one gives us 48. We factor, we want two numbers, the product is C, which is 48. The sum is B, which is negative 16. So we get negative 4 and negative 12. So X is either 4 or 12. And here's the importance of checking. You can't assume those are the solutions. You have to plug in and observe. So let's plug in 4 here. Notice what happens. 4 times 2, 8 and 1 is 9. The square root is 3 plus 7. Is it equal to 4? No, because the left side is 10. What does it mean? This doesn't work. 10 equals 4. No, therefore this is out. What about 12? Let's plug it in. 2 times 12, 24, and 1 is 25. Comes out as 5 and 7. 12. Yes, it works. Therefore, there is only one solution, X equals 12. This doesn't work. The terminology for that, it's an extraneous solution. All right, we want to solve this equation. And the process is to simplify each side. We're going to square this to x squared plus 4x plus 4. We're going to multiply these two. This is x squared, negative 1 and negative 6. They add up to negative 7x. Their product is plus 6. Now we can drop the x squared. I hope you realize that. We can drop it. This one adds up to 4x and it becomes 11x. 4 gets subtracted from 6 and it becomes 2. Divide and x becomes 2 over 11. In this case, 5/3, we can raise both sides to the power of 3/5, and in one shot, the left side comes out as 4x plus 1. By the way, it's important to know whether you're raising to a power of odd or even. In essence, 5, the numerator is important, which is odd. If it's even, you got to be careful, you get plus minus 1. Now, what is 32 to the power of 3/5? Is the 5th root of 32 to the 3rd power. So write it this way. And I hope you remember, this is obviously 2 and 2/3 becomes 8. This is 2. 2 to the 3rd power is 8. Subtract the 1. And you get 7 divided by 4. That's the answer. What I want to write for you is the following formula. A to the power of minus m over n is 1 over a to the power of m over n. Also, a to the power of m over n is the nth root of a to the power of m, or the, let me erase that, it didn't look good, this one, or the nth root of a, and then you raise it to the power of n. That is the fastest way to come up with the answer, and that's what we did here. We want to come up with the answer. We have a choice of simplifying, or the best course of action would be to do the substitution. Let 3x minus 4 be any variable of your choice except x. So y is 3x minus 4. We have 2y squared plus y minus 1. And that's a simple factoring. Y plus 1 times 2, y minus 1 equal to 0. Y becomes negative 1, also 1/2. And it's important to know we are not done. We are interested in calculating the x value. So we're going to replace the y with 3x minus 4. And this is an easy fix. Negative 4 goes to the other side, becomes positive 4, and 3 divided by 3 is 1. Negative 4 goes to the other side, becomes positive 4 with 1/2. So this becomes 3. This becomes 4 with 1/2 becomes 9/2 divided by 3 becomes 3/2. So we have those two solutions, you can also check. We do the same thing here, substitution. We let this one with the lower exponent to be any variable not x, like y, z, m, u, you name it. And in that case, x to the power of 2/3 becomes the square of that. Therefore, if we choose this to be m, this is m squared. So m squared equals 2m plus 3. Move everything to the left. You get m squared minus 2m minus 3 equals 0. A very simple factor, which results in m being 3, m being -1. But remember, we are interested in x, not m. In order for you to get to x, you look at this one. How do I get to x? I have to raise this to the third power. So if I raise this to the third power, x is m cubed. If x is m cubed, then one of the answers is 3 cubed, which is 27. The other one is -1 cubed, which is -1. And of course, you really should check with the original equation. I leave it for you to do so. Here's the next one. We can solve by factoring. So we move this -15 becomes +15. You have a choice of factoring it just the way it is, or replacing r squared, let's say, with x, and it becomes x squared minus 8r plus 15. You don't have to, you can keep it as r squared. If you put r squared and r squared, you need two numbers. The product is +15, the sum is -8. Those are -3, -5. And again, if you don't see that, you can do the substitution. So r squared is 3 or 5. If r squared is 3, r is plus minus square root of 3. If r squared is 5, it's plus minus square root of 5. We're going to go with the substitution. Again, it's easier. Although you can multiply both sides by b squared, it will do the same, but it will be a different factoring. So if we want to go with the substitution, if this is the variable of interest, x, y, z, anything but b, then this would be the square of that. So if you choose x, then this becomes x squared. So 6x squared minus 5x plus 1. Again, it's an easy factoring. I hope you remember that. X is 1/2 here, x is 1/3 here. So it's important to know the meaning of that. B to the power of -1 means 1 over b. And I hope you realize that x is equal to 1 over b, then b is 1 over x. In other words, they are reciprocal of each other. So what is b? The reciprocal of this number is 2. The reciprocal of this number is 3. And that is the final answer for this. Substitution is a very powerful, methodology for solving equations. A fitness club charges $20 as a monthly access fee and $2 per day for use. Express the monthly cost in terms of daily usage. What will be the monthly cost if we use it for 15 days? So we let a variable of interest such as x represent the number of days, and therefore we want the cost. So let's say C of x, it has a daily cost of 2x, so each day 2x, and then a fixed cost of 20. So it's important to know 2 is the variable cost, which is the slope, and 20 is a fixed cost, which is really the y-intercept, in this case, the c-intercept. For part B, replace the x with 15, that's 30 plus 20, and that gives us $50 for that one. If the length of a rectangle is twice its width, and its perimeter is given as 90 meters, then we want to find the dimensions of that room in that rectangular format. So if this is the width, the length is 2 times that, or 2W. So we know that the relationship between the length and the width is that length is equal to 2 times the width. And we know P is 2L plus 2W, which is given as 90. So the length is 2 times W. And here's the formula. By the way, the formula could be as 2 times L plus W. Either way is fine. We are going to replace the L with 2W. So 2 times 2W gives us 4W. 4 and 2, 6W is 90. And if we divide by 6, the width becomes 15 meters. And if the width is 15, the length is 2 times that, it's 30 meters. The width is 15 meters, the length is 30 meters.